Hello, everyone. Welcome to the library. I'm Norman Buckwald, and I am the librarian who is going to be showing you today how to use our various different resources to find scholarly articles about issues that are addressed in the novel Girl, Woman, and Other by Bernardine Evaristo. Now, first of all, I'm going to lead you directly to our library research guide. Now, its web address, as you can see here, is libraryguides.chabotcollege.edu/ENGL4, last name instructor Langdon with a capital L, and then 2020, and that will take you directly to this guide. I will also show you how to find this from the college and library websites shortly. But first, let me introduce myself. I have this title called the Information Literacy and Technology Librarian. And what that means in a nutshell is that for the past 20 years, I have been a leader with respect to our electronic resources and to the web services that the library uses. And this is especially important because in this day and age, when it comes to using the library, say that there was no COVID right now, most of you would probably still be starting from your computers, your laptops, or your devices doing your research through the library website. And of course, the only difference right now is that our physical materials currently aren't being circulated. And of course, our physical building is currently closed. So unfortunately, our student computer lab and our various different study spaces are not available at this time. But other than that, the library is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with at least 85% of the entire library's collection available to you online and in full text. That means that your articles are available in PDF or some other format. Sometimes you can even get audio versions of your articles that you can listen to. It depends on what's available. That will appear in over 50 databases that we as a college subscribe to. So it's a matter of one, getting access to this content. And then, of course, I'm going to be showing you some techniques on how to do research for this particular type of assignment, because this is actually not your characteristic literary criticism assignment, because this work is only a year old. And so there isn't really any published criticisms on this work as of yet. So your paper is not going to be responding to what, say, other critics say or what professional critics say who have been published. But instead, you are going to be going by various different either theoretical frameworks or talking about culture, history, or some other aspect regarding the book. And even if you write what is called the formal or new criticism type of book, I will be showing you how to find various different additional resources. Now, first, when I usually give a library orientation, I ask the class, where have you gone for research in the past? And most would often answer Google. And let me just say that when it comes to providing really serious research like this, Google may, in most cases, not be the most fruitful place to go for research, definitely not the first place to go for research. And there is a slides presentation I have available on the homepage of this guide that actually discusses the pros and cons about this. Now, Since I also talk about this for English 1, 1A courses, and for communication studies courses, some of you in this class may have already endured this. So I'm going to provide a separate session that talks about why a library database in most cases will be where you want to go for your research versus Google. But in a nutshell, what's important to keep in mind is that when it comes to Google, you are a consumer first and foremost, not a researcher. Whereas in a library database, you are definitely a researcher first and foremost. And this is especially important to understand because in a commercial environment, the whole goal is to encourage the person doing the research to eventually, want to buy or purchase something. And so all of the algorithms that happen behind Google can definitely provide such a result. And then to further complicate that, search engines can be easily manipulated, just like social media can be manipulated. And this has been going on since pretty much the first days of the web. So that means that with what we call bots, those are those computer software programs that do all these various things to lead to particular results from, say, a search engine, or what will pop up in your social media newsfeed. And with some manipulation of outside software from dubious organizations, you can have instances where non-existing persons are liking websites and non-existing websites are linking to websites. And this can lead to what are called cloaked websites that could have different agendas. And definitely, there's been a whole history of, unfortunately, racist websites that have come up cloaked that purport to be, informational or educational. It isn't until you look at it beyond its first professional outlook that you eventually start to realize something may be going awry here. I'm sort of trying to show it through my mouse through Zoom, but the authoritative website of Martin Luther King isn't going to have a link in front that says why the King holiday should be repealed. And yes, likewise, you will come across, homophobic and various other types of websites and groups, anti-transgender and whatnot. In fact, when I think about the topics that are covered in this book, I would definitely recommend that you not go to Google first. You don't want to go to Google last. And there actually will be good times to go to Google, and I'm definitely going to show you an example towards the end of today. But in most cases, you're going to want to start in a library database or a library online resource, a reference, as a beginning, and not Google at large. That doesn't mean you're still going to come across bunches of results. You will. But I'm going to be showing you some ways and some techniques of how to navigate yourself around them. Now, first, I'm going to show you how to find this page if, for whatever reason, you don't have the URL in front of you. Of course, that URL is always going to be the best way and the most direct way. But let's say that you started at the Chabot College website. Under academics is where you will find the link to library, the third one on the right. And then if you were in general doing library research and knew where to go, you'd go to the library catalog to find what's both in our physical and online collection. Of course, our physical collection right now is not circulating, unfortunately. And our databases tab, of course, is where you go to search various different databases. Now, the databases page leads to all these multi-subjects, and if you go to databases A to Z, you will find that it's a little bit exaggerated because some of these are listed more than once, but it tells you that there are 85 different places to go to research. And that's definitely a lot of places and a lot of different areas to begin. And so what we do is when we prepare a library orientation, we create a separate library research guide. And you find those by selecting on the library orientations tab. So as you notice, this is our general library navigation list on top. We click on the library orientations tab. This leads us to this result that tells us that all the library orientations for courses in this year are listed. And so we scroll down alphabetically, and that's, I'd say, the best way to do this, until you get to your course English 4, followed by the last name of your instructor, and usually listed somewhere after that will be, say what the topic is at hand. So as you can see, it's Girl, Woman, and Other, Bernardine Evaristo's novel. And that takes you directly to this guide that I have tailor-made for you for this assignment. Now this page is divided into a number of different pages. There's the home page, there's the search terms page. One nice thing about databases, unlike Google, is that there is what is called controlled vocabulary. That is controlled subject terms. Library of Congress creates a lot of these subject headings as well as a lot of indexing services. And so this provides a nice list of some common subject headings that you may be using for your particular research project. And so this gives you a good starting point of some search terms. Now, where some of you may go, it may be even beyond this. That always happens. But this is definitely a good place to go to find and learn the most common controlled subject terms. What are the official subject headings versus, say, keywords? And of course, most often we combine our various different subject terms for our results. There is a types of sources page that talks about scholarly versus popular. This is probably one of the two pages you'll go to most often related to this guide. This is where you can find backgrounds to various different, where you would go in for various different criticisms. So, biographical information, critical race theory, feminist theory, a whole list of key databases to search, a key guide about literary terms and multicultural literature, as well as going background to various different countries and regions, such as Great Britain, Africa, and the United States. There's a separate page on which database, and this is going by, if you're going by starting with a particular theoretical framework in literary theory. And this is where you would go. This would give you some ideas of what main suggestions of where to go. Although I would recommend going back to here because it's not, there are some other items that would definitely be helpful for your research. There's a guide of footnote chasing, which I will define to you later, but what's most important to remember is sometimes this may be your most fruitful method of finding some very good journal articles and ebooks. And that is by looking at what is underneath either the works cited of that wonderful resource or seeing what other resources may have cited that wonderful resource. I'm going to be showing you that later. There's a page on various different tutorials. We have a citing sources page. And finally, this last one is what I would call our traditional literary criticism databases and places to go. If you were writing a literary criticism, say a work that's 5 years or older, that is that there are some published criticisms about that item involved. And I've included this page because I have no idea what other assignments you might have in this class or other things you might want to explore on other reading materials you'll be pursuing in this class. And so this is definitely a good place to go to find what other critics have said about that work. And so that's what that last page is about. Now, the homepage, I always like to spend a little time talking about, as anxious as I'm sure you are to want to get into a database. And they're for good reason, because this page is basically where to go to get the tools, where to get help, as well as some general information about this assignment. So right now, and this page could have some additional things. I'm already thinking, for example, that the Google Slides refers to a presentation from Dr. Sophia Noble about how with search engines and modern technologies, unfortunately, she wrote a book called Algorithms of Oppression to basically point out about how often disturbing racist and other type of isms unfortunately appear in search results. And so I strongly recommend that you watch that 12-minute material. It's like a TED Talk. Right now it's linked in the Google versus library databases. I will also include a link to that down below, but I strongly recommend that you take a look at that, because this is very important for you to understand the pitfalls of Google, because even if you may not be going to first but more to last, you need to definitely understand the pitfalls that happen with Google. And there are ways to get around it, and I will talk about that towards the end of today's tutorial. Listed on the top left is where you can go to get help. So chat with a librarian. A librarian is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And listed underneath hours for fall 2020 are the times that a librarian from Chabot College, who especially will be familiar with this assignment and especially can provide you more help than a guest librarian on how to, if you're having trouble, say, getting into a database, for some reason your WID number is not being going through, that is where you will get that information. When you put in a question for help, what's important to understand, I apologize for the phone ringing in from behind, but I'll let it go so you can hear me. Okay, so you want to include your name and your email address always. When you type in a question, and this is going to be very important because you may have a guest librarian, and mention that if you're looking to find, research articles on Bernardine, Evaristo's Girl, Woman, and Other, you need to explain to them that you're not, that if the person tells you, well, go and use, Literature Resource Center or Gale Literary Criticism, while it could be helpful depending upon your assignment, in a number of cases it won't be. So mention that this book is only a year old. Mention maybe the theoretical framework that you're especially going to be using for, or something related to culture, like say something about 1970s in London, counterculture movement, something like that. That will give them a little bit more grounding of where to go. You could also mention other things about what happened in the novel in case you're still trying to figure out and sort out what you're going to write about. But that would be an important part of when you include a question. So so 2019 novel, Girl, Woman, Other, and want to find information about Black women's lives during the counterculture movement in the 1970s. Something like that. So, I mean, the more specific you can, the more helpful you will be in terms of what the librarian can do for you. And so this is also available on our library homepage. In this case, to see this little bar on the right, click on that, and there is that same bar itself. And as you're exploring certain databases, especially EBSCOs, you also will see that sidebar. So wherever you don't have to go back to this page and say, oh my God, I need help. There are other places as you are searching where you can definitely immediately go to that chat box and ask for help. Listed down below, it says download the library app. There is a tutorial on how to use Lean Library. I strongly recommend that you download this because this is going to save you both time and money whenever you are searching the web at large, whether through Google. Let's say that you are looking for an ebook of say a novel or another work in another class. In Amazon, it will tell you if it's available in the library. Something pops up at the top right. You click on that, and sometimes you may have to click again, so you have to wait for another pop-up after that. But eventually you will go to the ebook itself. And likewise, if you're searching Google Scholar or Google at large, if article comes up and it happens to be in the library's collection, it will pop up. So for your desktop and laptop, unfortunately, it's not ready for smartphones yet. You want to make sure that you download this browser extension called Lean Library. In the center, of course, is the introduction, and down below is a little explanation of what goes into a lit-crit research paper. So Instructor Langdon will describe this much better than I can. But when you're writing a paper, you, of course, are most often going to refer to the original work itself and your interpretation as the critic. What you're writing about that's important from that novel. In most cases, you will be incorporating literary theory. Your instructor has provided you that wonderful PowerPoint presentation of various different theoretical approaches and concepts that you can use as a starting point to explore and tackle this novel. It doesn't have to be like this is the theme and that's it. You know, I mean, you have it can be much more rich than that, and that's what's nice about all these theoretical frameworks and concepts. So definitely you'd incorporate that. Then there's the more tangible. So this is, you know, like whatever literary theory you're using, you know, the biography of the author herself or other writings, writings that are similar to this work, historical articles about this time period, aspects of culture, say Black culture, Black lesbian culture in London in the 1970s and 80s. You can definitely find that. Certain sociological or psychological elements. There are lots of places you can go. The fourth element, which is where you find published literary criticism, that you won't be doing for this particular paper because this book is too new. You could perhaps come across some criticisms that talk about Evaristo's work at large, although she is a fairly newer author. So it's not going to be like finding all you know, hundreds of recent articles on Toni Morrison, for example, who has been, of course, she passed away last year, but definitely as a literary author, she's been around for decades, whereas Evaristo is new and up and coming. But that would be the only case where you would go for literary criticism, anything regarding the author and her other works, and maybe works that are similar to this. But that would then be writing a comparison or a literary survey, which is not exactly what this type of assignment is asking for, though more certainly you may come across a great resource that is a comparison of, say, Bernardine Evaristo's other work or a similar work, or a survey of similar works in, say, post-colonial literature that you might want to refer to. But yeah, in most cases, you're going to be writing your own criticism of just this work itself using a certain, theoretical concept, paradigm, aspects of culture and history, et cetera, and so forth. And finally, different ways you can contact me. Now, I have listed my Zoom address, but I have to warn you, more often than not, I will get a notification that someone has been to my room at a time that is hours later. So if you're looking for immediate help, you want to come to here. And if you want a Zoom session with me, click on email me and then send an email request to me if you want me to give you a little one-on-one type of help. I am most certainly happy to do that outside. And in the chat, by the way, the librarian and chat reference, in most cases, they also have the ability to do a screen sharing session, which either you could share your screen or a librarian can share his or her screen. And so we can definitely help each other one-on-one, just as we can do right now, which is in the reference room, we'd be helping you from the reference desk or from the reference computer, or if this is a live orientation session, we'd be helping you one-on-one during that session itself. So we're still able to provide you that help, and I want you to remember that that is definitely available to you. Okay, so I mentioned the search terms earlier, and let me show you a little example of why it's important. So official subject headings are definitely important. And especially when it comes to race and gender, sometimes a official subject heading is going to be more fruitful than not. This can especially be challenging with right now, for example, this is, it's been 4 years later and this still hasn't been resolved. Library of Congress wanted to replace the subject heading for illegal aliens, which was considered derogatory, to non-citizens and unauthorized immigration as the start of newer official subject headings. And for the first time ever, the Republicans in Congress wanted to keep this term. Even though Library of Congress has effectively pointed out that the main concern here wasn't so much the word illegal as it was the word aliens, because most often when people think of the word aliens, they're thinking of extraterrestrials rather than people. And that definitely is an important thing to understand when it comes to subject headings, when it comes to issues of race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender, because sometimes once in a while these older terms appear. Once in a while I will still see the term miscegenation appear for interracial couples, for example, which for all intents and purposes in today's language and lexicon, that is considered derogatory and a racist description of interracial couples. So I want you to at least be prepared that this may appear sometimes in some things that you're looking for. Right now, as far as Library of Congress is concerned, when we're talking about Blacks in the United States, the subject heading African Americans is used. Whereas outside the United States, that's when you use the term Blacks. So if you're talking about Blacks in the United States, you want to use African Americans instead of Blacks and United States, in other words. Otherwise, you're talking about Black people outside of the United States. This was supposed to be an attempt to provide a little bit of vocabulary control and clarity. Of course, it also demonstrates the United States centrism, I guess, of what it's doing. But there is actually a subject heading that I did come across that is Black British, but doesn't come across as often. So if you notice, I included various different subject headings here. Sometimes the subject heading may not match what you're thinking of. For example, there is no subject heading right now for non-binary persons. The actual official subject heading is gender non-conforming people, which I don't think would come to you right away. So I have provided various different subject terms that will help you through manipulating through that. Now, when it comes to basic theoretical concepts, this is also important to keep in mind. So yes, post-colonialism is definitely probably the what shows up most often in terms of concept, but it could be a little bit more specific and say post-colonial analysis or post-colonialism in literature, or different aspects such as colonization or decolonization, depending on where you're going in your research. We have subject headings for various different regions. This is far from complete. For example, Africa is an entire continent, so you can definitely be more specific, like where in Africa, for example. And then, once again, various different criticisms. Now, literary criticism is probably the main subject heading behind all of these criticism concepts, but there are going to be times when they're more useful. For example, you might want to use literary criticism when you mean the new criticism or formalism, as well as other instances as well. Otherwise, you have sometimes a certain type of criticism and you add literature afterwards because there are various different disciplines. And sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not, as you can see. And sometimes they go in different ways than you expect. For example, for feminist literary criticism, it's feminist literary criticism. But whereas when it comes to, there is no, however, LGBT criticism literature. Instead, it's LGBT or LGBTQ plus literature, or gay literature, or queer theory that you're going about finding various different things. Now, this is not a complete list. There are other subject headings that you will come across, and I'm going to show you how to find those when you're searching databases. Finally, before we get into the databases, and I know you're asking, when are we going to get there already? And definitely when I post this on the guide itself, and it will also be a YouTube. I will also post this on YouTube. I will state time-wise when we get to the databases, but this is the last part that we're going to talk about before we get there, and that is types of resources. And so there are what are called scholarly and popular resources that are available in general in the library's collection. And both of these often appear in the same database. So it's important that when we know how to distinguish those, I will definitely show you some techniques on how to limit your search results to certain types of results. But it's definitely an important part to know. So I'm going to use COVID as an example here when we talk about the information timeline. So let's say, okay, today is October 5th, 2020. So right now, at this moment, the news that President Trump has gotten the COVID virus himself is very, very new. So you're not going to find a journal scholarly article or an entire book on the subject. So in a way to understand the information timeline, so also known as the information cycle, is we start with the same day internet, television, radio is where you would go to find this. Newspapers to a certain extent, but we're going to have to wait at least a week to find this in a magazine like Time or People. And definitely, if we wanted a scholarly article that talked about, say, president's illnesses and included Trump's at a critical time of election, similar, say, as Eisenhower had, when he was up for re-election in 1956. You can find the latter definitely in a scholarly journal article, but you're not going to find that regarding Trump himself. In fact, finding anything about COVID politically is right now going to be teeny tiny because this is not even a year old what is happening. And so it requires at least months for a scholarly journal, a well-researched article to be produced and ready for publication. And then books, of course, most often take years. So how that appears in terms of difference. Well, a magazine, especially since magazine and journal articles appear together in databases themselves. So a scholarly article is usually written with an author with credentials. So say literary critics, including literary critics with, say, specialty in, say, deconstructionalism or post-colonialism, or on LGBT literature, and have written quite a bit and studied authors such as our author herself. That scholar is going to have usually a master's degree, usually like say in English or in social sciences or in history or in ethnic studies or something such as that. And they will be writing for a journal whose audience is those that have a similar scholarly type of background. And so they're looking to learn more about the research that they themselves are focusing upon. And then we use a process called peer review. And so instead of just one editor, there's a bunch of other scholars in that same specialty, maybe even done the same type of research or even read the same type of materials, maybe even read the book that is being discussed itself, very likely. And we're providing that author feedback as they deem if the article is ready for publication. By contrast, a popular article is written by a journalist who's professional in that area, but not at the topic at hand necessarily. And so there won't be, say, a list of works cited of where they did all their research from. It could be like an interview or a news story or a biographical story. And the editor will, and definitely those that work behind a popular magazine will definitely do some fact checking, but it doesn't have the same type of scrutiny that you would get from a peer-reviewed article. So I've already mentioned the audience and the difference. For a popular article, general public. For citation, sources are cited in footnotes, bibliography. You know, you're going to get a whole list of resources almost always. Whereas a popular article, you're not going to get that. As I mentioned, the peer review process, I've already mentioned it here. Publisher will be an academic scholarly press, whereas popular presses are very different in terms of scope. And finally, in format, your books and scholarly journal articles, the books especially from an academic library will most often be scholarly. Sometimes they may be more popular and they'll still have fact checkers. In fact, a very decent publishing company for a nonfiction book will definitely have fact checkers at hand, but otherwise they'll usually be scholarly in format, usually from the similar type of publishers as those of published journals. All right, listed on the right, I've already covered this, is why library databases, the internet, and as I mentioned, that will be covered in a separate online tutorial once I eventually create it. It will be at least later this week. It might be in a week. It depends, of course, upon my schedule. But I have shown that presentation to various library orientations and kept meaning to provide one solely on that. And so this particular class is finally giving me motivation to do that. And so I will do that. Okay, Finally, yay! Finally, we're going to talk about going into and finding these resources themselves. So I have created two separate tabs. This one I recommend you go to first, especially while you're still trying to figure out what you're going to write about. Then later on, if you are going for a particular theoretical framework or paradigm, and only really in that case, you would go to this page, which database. And even then, I would tell you to also toggle between these two, because there are some additional good resources on this page that you might want to use. When it comes to using a database, you first want to figure out what you're going to write about, and sometimes you need background information. So I have biographical information listed on the top left, because even if you're not writing a biographical criticism, it never hurts to find a little bit more about who the author is and what she wrote about. So that's why I listed on the top left first. So the first one that's listed here is to Gale Literature. Name. So give me a second. I have a sneaking suspicion of getting her name and stuff. So Bernadine. Yeah, Bernadine. I did remember the R. Good for me. And you notice that it comes up. A lot of these databases are very good in coming up of what it's trying to find. And as you can see here, we find 51 criticisms. And actually, a lot of these, as you can see, are written by her herself. That's what I mean, that she's still new and up and coming. So there's a lot of essays she wrote because she was she was one of the main reviewers for a publication called World Literature Today, which actually may be interesting just to see what else she has written about. But otherwise, where you would want to go is through the biography selection. So go away from literature criticism or biographies. And here you can definitely get a biography about the person herself. So here we have a list of all the books she's read. I mean, I wasn't kidding. She is an up-and-coming author. She started publishing in the 1990s. Looks like she wrote a play, though, once upon a time earlier in her career. I wonder if that play is even easy to find. It may not be. Which is interesting to note, because there is a character. Actually, more than one character. There's characters that are definitely involved in theater in this book, if I remember correctly. So that's an interesting thing already to learn for those of you who are going for the biographical perspective. And here we have a very meaty biography of the author herself. Now, if you want to look beyond what's being published in a literary criticism database, biographies in our databases is another place to go if you want to find more. And yeah, we have 44 results come up, and here we have an interview. Granted, it's published in fall 2008, but you might want to take a look at that. So there are more places of where you can find, and this is the important part that I'm showing you. Never try to limit yourself to just one database in your research. Now, for other background information, sometimes you're going to be looking through reference ebooks. So for example, if you're going to write about critical race theory, for example, I strongly recommend to get a good background to select the link that says racial literacy reference ebooks. And then you can go ahead and start cross-searching this. You can search within this individual collection. So for example, if we wanted to learn more about intersectionality, we can enter that and then go through these particular books. That definitely will give you a good understanding about that. Or sometimes there may be a book that focuses on this topic itself, as you can see here, on navigating intersectionality. And then, as you can see, there are different various complexities and aspects that you might want to write about. This can especially help you figure out maybe how you want to narrow down your topic for your paper, for example. And so definitely these type of reference areas are good to go. Likewise for the gender and queer studies books. We can enter, say, non-binary, although as I already told you, that's a key word. And we found a result here on non-binary genders that we can then go further and explore. And what's nice about these subject encyclopedias is they're very meaty. And they are written for you as a student rather than other scholars who already assume and know certain things, like they would already know what a non-binary person is. But you as a student are learning more about it. And you notice further down below that there's a list of readings. So what's nice about these subject encyclopedias is they are the more, I mean, Wikipedia has tried to imitate and replicate it, but unlike Wikipedia where anybody can author anything and anybody can refer to anything, so you then have to go through and evaluate and determine, is this really legitimate? Is this really scholarly? You're already in this world where that is the case. And so then you can figure out where to go to then find more information. And if, say, you wanted to find where one of these books are or articles, such as, for example, this one on queering gender and psychology and sexuality, we can copy this. And then this is a technique I'm going to be showing you later. But I'm going to go to the footnote chasing right now and click on Articles Plus. I'm especially going to encourage you to go here when you're searching big search engine tools that capture a lot of things. And that way, rather than worried about which exact database it is, we can look that up, and lo and behold, this particular article refers to appears right here. So this is definitely very fruitful, as you can see, about going through these backgrounds of these various different encyclopedias. I have listed here an Encyclopedia of Feminist Literary Theory, post-colonial fiction, critical insights, world mythology, even race and ethnicity and digital culture. Lots of different places that you can go as a beginning point. And I'm especially going to show you what happens when you come across an encyclopedia that, or if you come across a result and it leads you to this entire encyclopedia, what to do when you get here. And so when you're searching for a different concept, you click on Search Within. And let's say that we were interested in finding, I don't know, black lesbians. That may be a little too specific, I suspect. So I entered the terms, and then you see when our terms appear and pop up, and then we can either explore from there. Or, since we see that this is alphabetical, we can start with either blacks, or actually, I would most likely, since when we're talking about lesbians first, I'll look up for the term lesbians to talk about lesbian identity. Because I suspect in most cases, adjectives won't be periods. It's going to literally start the main concepts. I'm especially going to show you for other, since this book definitely, right from the title, you know, the best way to search for other is definitely not search within other. That's a too common word. So instead, we go to O and scroll down and we get to other. And yeah, here is a very meaty article that discusses what the other is in terms of identity. And so, wow, you can see that this is a multi-page. And again, further reading to further find more resources after that general introduction. So definitely a good place to go to get all of these backgrounds. Now, if you want to learn more about most of these theoretical concepts, under literary terms and multicultural literature, I recommend in most cases you go to the Encyclopedia of Literary and Cultural Theory, and then you either browse, and so, you know, literary theory from 1900 to 1966, literary theory from 1966 to the present, and cultural theory you can search for those particular terms, or you can definitely go through various different concepts. So let's say that one could argue to a certain extent alienation is a theme that appears at times in this book. And if this is what you were writing about, this is a really good concept. Or maybe not. Maybe you might think maybe unlike other works in 20th century, this really isn't so much about alienation like other works. So, it depends where you're going in terms of what you believe is really emphasized in this book. But there are definitely different places that you can go. And then you can also search within the publication top right. So let's say that, let's attempt the other. I suspect this is one case where that's probably, other alternative, this might be condition of otherness. Okay, here we go. And so here we can have this according to, and this is definitely a literary and cultural theorist serving Turcan, who writes this article. Notice that all of these subject encyclopedia articles are authored. And then listed below a reference and other suggested areas that you can go. So definitely good place to go, especially as you're exploring your topic. Likewise, under Great Britain, Africa, and the United States. So if you wanted to learn more about the United Kingdom, I mean, some of us think we know it, but we've never been there. And of course, you're reading about it mostly in a historical or contemporary perspective and want to know more about it. Definitely a good place to go to explore. Here is a whole book about the United Kingdom under Nations of the World series. Otherwise, you'll be going to, after that. Well, it depends. Sometimes this may be going more earlier in your research, but usually after you at least understand a little bit of culture and history or whatever, then I would recommend starting to search for databases for journal articles. And in most cases, you're going to be finding journal articles. Some magazine articles may suffice, but in most cases, it's going to be journal articles you're finding. And so Articles Plus is the largest set. And I'm going to be encouraging you in most cases to try to do not only search here, because you may be really missing something that you would in a smaller database. Because Articles Plus cross-searches most databases, granted, first of all, not all. And not all content in all these databases will show up, so you need to keep that in mind. But something that might show up on the first page in another database may not show up for a later page. And so sometimes doing a most focused search is most recommended. But right now I'm going to show you example of searching here and then elsewhere. So let's say that we're interested in finding information from a post-colonialism perspective. And we're focused on the 1970s, and 70s is usually, by the way, usually you don't spell out numerically, just like you don't spell acronyms, you write out your terms. So we're going to say 70s. I'm going to add London. They had all these suggestions there. I'm going to add London in addition to all these variations of England. And I'm going to add blacks. And in this case, I'm not going to include African Americans or Black Americans because we are talking about blacks in London. So we come across here and immediately there might be some ebooks you might want to explore, like this one here, for example, on British decolonization from 1918 to 1984. That might especially may meet your interest. And let's see, we have modernism, women's popular romance. I don't know, only if we're writing a survey, which we're really not from our point. So I'm locating the English diaspora, race, caste, and Christianity. There could be some promising things here, but let's say that, there's all these ebooks. I want to get to the journals. So we can limit our search to journals. So those here limit to. We select journals to peer-reviewed scholarly. And now we're looking at journal articles. This one might be something you might want to explore depending where you go. Post-colonialism, study of anti-Semitism. Interesting. Black, Asian, and ethnic minority ethnic female nurses. Okay, maybe, you know, there's a question of how relevant it is. But this is why this is so broad in scope and why I would recommend, instead of going to Articles Plus, that we go to Articles Plus limited to with a literature focus. So I have given you the same scope, but it is more focused. Now, one thing that you probably noticed that I've been doing here is when we go to Articles Plus, you're by default a guest. And so the next thing you want to do is to log in for full access. And I'm surprised this didn't pop up. So let me show you what usually would pop up through a different method. So give me a second here. And don't even pay attention to what I'm doing here. Eventually, you're going to come across the screen. And so whenever you access a database like this, your username is your WID number, and your password is your 6-digit class web PIN. So same way of getting class web, not the same way right now getting into Canvas. That might change eventually in the future because we're eventually going to become a single sign-on campus. But right now, you log into library databases the same way you log into class web. If you're not successful logging in, there are other ways to get into databases. And I will provide on the home page of the LibGuide. I'm surprised I haven't done it yet. But, oh, don't pay attention to this because this isn't where you'd be going to. Where you'd be going to next is this, Articles Plus. And let me make sure, I'm going to turn these 3 off because I did all these examples here. I want to make sure that what you would go into after you log in is this. And then we do the same search. So again, you notice that, and I strongly encourage you, is to do multiple search terms. Now notice here, it gives suggestions of similar words or terms. I'd say go ahead and use those because those can definitely help your search. Likewise with England or Britain or United Kingdom, except I'm going to add London to that. Blacks and 70s. Now notice that as I entered that, some suggestions came down below. That may be fruitful on their own. So here we have, notice that British decolonization also appears here. But you notice that things that weren't exactly related to literature, such as nursing, for example, that doesn't appear. And again, we can limit our search to journals peer-reviewed scholarly. And so this leads us to the journal article. And so here we have a number of different articles, some of them that refer to particular types of works, but others that can lead elsewhere, such and some of these can be definitely quite fruitful in terms of concepts, such as item number 10 here. And so, as you can see, and I always recommend looking more than just the first page. You should always be doing that, by the way, if you ever use Google anyway, even if you're just looking something up, because there may be some good things that are further down the line. You know, at least make a quick exploration of the first few pages. And when you find something that you want to, that you find especially promising, that is where the abstract takes place. So let's say that we're interested in this. So the lost theaters of African-American internationalism. So says down below, an essay is presented on how Henry Francis Downing's work of diplomacy placed him within a system of international representation. It offers the first substantial treatment of Downing's work as a prolific London, England-based playwright during the 1910s. Okay, by reading that, unless you're interested in talking about a big historical perspective and probably doing a comparison or survey, that won't meet your interest. But this, as you can see, going through this abstract, that's what this is called after we have our citation here. That's in this part here. So after a citation or abstract, that's a brief summary of what the article's about. Notice that each thing down below has subject headings. When we do find something that's promising, we can always jot down promising subject headings for future searches, depending where we're going in our search. For example, we might want to include race relations, maybe, as another search term, for example. And so we can add that onto here. And notice that you can add as many bars as you want for as many search terms as you want. By the way, I don't recommend using this many rows when you're in a smaller database, because you might eventually come with no results. But definitely, this is definitely where you can go and find various different promising type of articles. After that, then you might want to focus on a subject database. So let's use the history database here, which is definitely a good place to go to find post-colonialism criticisms. And so I'm going to include that here and as well. Well, not only the criticism, but theory itself. And I'm going to add 70s and blacks. And I'm going to be very, since a lot came up, I'm just going to say London for right now. Actually, no, let's add London. And so listed below are various different articles that you can find and discover. And again, we have our subject headings listed right afterwards down below. And again, we have our abstracts. Sometimes the database is going to look a little bit different. You notice, for example, in this database, it tells you on the left if it's an academic journal versus a different other type of resource. It has this general EBSCO background and type of look. That's going to look different if you say you're searching Black Studies Center, which definitely is where you would go to find various different resources. Post-colonialism and Blacks and London. Realistic, very limited here. So scrolling down, we have some key readings that we can take a look at. We have different references and journal articles here. And whenever something is listed here as full text, that means the text of the article is in here itself. And here we have on constructing whiteness, this full article that we can look at and use. By the way, whenever you find a promising article, I recommend you always email the article to yourself. Always make sure that the subject line is filled. So article 1. Sometimes it only asks for your address. EBSCO usually asks for your address. We can choose how we want to email sent. I'm going to select HTML. There wasn't a PDF version to scan of the original article as there usually is. Most often, actually, the database like Black Studies Center, that's different. Click send to email. And so we sent that to ourselves. And I recommend doing this in general because it's easy to lose track of where you found something and where you got it from. In most cases, they are an EBSCO host, and MLA 8 does allow when when you cite an article that it comes from EBSCOhost, but sometimes your instructors, and I believe I know instructor Langdon well enough, he may want you to especially identify the specific database it came from. So it's important that you pay attention where you're coming from. And if you send these articles to yourself, you'll get that type of information definitely sent to you. So there's lots of different places that you can go. So you can search ebooks to find more scholarly ebooks. You never, when it comes to ebooks, some ebooks you have to read cover to cover to get what it's fully about. But in most cases, chapters and essays it's divided into, you can definitely take an essay or a chapter from that ebook itself. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of different selections. And reason why I listed them as a general list here is that some of your assignments could easily criss and cross more than one point. So while I also provided this page to you as under which database as to where to go to find some background materials, as well as where to search databases, don't look at any of this as a complete list. I would then go to criticism backgrounds and find more. And I would recommend that in almost all cases. Okay. So I have an example here. Hopefully it's still here. And I don't see it, so I'm going to, this is an article I shared with your instructor recently. And just to make it easy, even though I found it from a different method, but it was from this type of research that I showed up above. And it's making me start over again. That's a bit of a pain, but it's what it's about. But it's about what he wrote about English culture in the 1960s, which I think definitely is something that is definitely related to what you say, the scene, especially of Fredonia, I would say, or London. And most important search term would be post-colonialism. That's how I found it. By the way, another way of getting all those variations post-colonial is I put an asterisk. And so after L, anything that comes after that in a word will show up in the results. And so what I came across is this wonderful article, Britain is Still on Hawaii, from James Baldwin. And okay, let's say that first of all, if you want to email this article, as I showed you before, I wasn't kidding when I said it looks different for different databases sometimes. We can enter our information again. Subject line, colonialism. This will be my second article right now. And by the way, subject line is important because it might end up in your spam folder. It's the way you can easily find it. Make sure your full text options are checked. By default, it goes to MLA, and I'll talk about that in a second because while these databases do generate citations, you always need to double check them. And so that's definitely important. But on the right side of the EBSCO databases, and it differs a little bit in some of the other ones like Black Studies Center, and in terms of it may not be there, so you may have to wait until you see it generated in your results. But you notice here that when I click on the yellow paper on the side, it gives us our various different citation formats, and here is MLA. And so it follows MLA format, and it even includes indentation. Not some of the other databases don't do that, so you need to be prepared. And then after you cite the part, and this is usually like as if you found this from the original journal itself. This is a scan, so you now have to comment about the electronic elements. You have after that the database, which is listed in italics. followed by either what is called the permalink, which is what is here, or the DOI number, the document object identifier number. That's going to vary depending on the journal where you're getting from. And by default, the DOI number is what you look for first, because that document object identifier, you can enter it in any database and in Google. And if it has a document object identifier, the electronic version will show up if it's available, accessible through that database. And that's what's nice of that part. Otherwise, if that's not available, it tells you to use what is called a permalink. Now, what is a permalink? Permalink is never this on top. I would only use whatever's on top if there is no permalink option, and even then you'll have to be prepared for the possibility that that may not work, because that is a temporary session access from a database. Instead, you want to click on the chain link and then copy and paste that permalink, if it was not already there, to be part of your citation. Now, going back to that MLA example. So, by the way, one strong hint I'm going to give you: most citation formats, whether it's MLA or APA, your title of your source, that is what the content is inside, or if it's an entire pamphlet or ebook or book, it will be in italics. So I'm going to give you that strong hint. And then this is MLA mainly for the database, you state that in italics. Now, MLA 8, unlike MLA 7, has said that stating just the vendor where it's from, so this is EBSCOhost, is definitely fine for identifying the electronic service from which you got your article from. MLA 7, the previous version, said you had to use a certain database. Now, MLA 8 still will encourage you to use a database, but it is not required. And because most often we're cross-searching different databases, that's one of the reasons why MLA decided to become more lenient on this. Though some instructors still prefer that you state exactly what database it's from. So if you're wondering where to find that, how you can find that in most cases, at least in EBSCOhost, is detailed record. Or in ProQuest, sometimes the record is listed on the bottom of the page if it's not on the top. And that is where, in this record, you can see what specific database it's coming from, which is actually Poetry and Short Story Reference Center. So if you want to be more specific, and you can do that, then it's just a matter of taking that MLA citation and replacing EBSCOhost with this in italics instead. Now here is where, actually I would have asked this at least a few times beforehand already. I would have asked you if you had any questions, and once I heard from you, there would have been something I realized I totally forgot and haven't even talked about as of yet. So if I do forget something that's important, I apologize ahead of time. And if you have a question, definitely let me know. So I have this page that's called, in quotation marks, footnote chasing. And footnote chasing is a term in the world of librarians. And we still use this term, even though literally the footnotes that are used, that are on the bottom literally of each page, that refer to what's above, that's not used in practice as much anymore. You either have your endnotes, you have your works cited list, you have your references at the end, and inside the paper yourself, you have these parenthetical references. Well, what I'm talking about here in footnote chasing is sometimes there is one article that you come across that really may be what you want to write about. And so I am using this example, this one, because I decided I'm going to write about post-colonialism and about counterculture, especially African Americans in this time period. And what James Baldwin had to say, what I got from that article, I especially really got interested in. So I definitely want to use this article. But I'm having trouble finding similar articles that are rich like this. So either whether it's about James Baldwin or other authors who have written about things similar as him. So what I could do is look at Rob Walter's article about this and go to the bottom of this article and look at these various different works cited. So there's actually interesting two parts. We have our notes part and we have our works cited list. And let's say, okay, I want to see if the library has one of these other types of resources. Now, I'm going to warn you ahead of time. In most cases, where it's not going to be as fruitful as you hope, because some of these are older and the shelf life right now, well, actually, shelf life's not the right term. The back file of what is online mostly goes to 1995. With databases like JSTOR, we're now going back further in time, but some of these we're not going to find in the library's online collection. But let's say that we're interested in finding the dialectics of self-discovery in James Baldwin's essays. We can go ahead and copy that. And then we go to our quick and dirty footnotes chasing page and say, okay, I'm going to do a wide rep search. So I'm going to see if this is available in the library's databases. So that's what footnote chasing is. And of course, I would be looking for it not because it's literally listed works cited, it's because it was something that was talked about in that paper that especially piques my curiosity. And lo and behold, it looks like we have it. It looks like it's in our JSTOR collection. And so when I click on the title of this, in this case, it's what is called a full text finder. So there's a little extra step that we have to take here. So yeah, it took me to this record. And what I need to do next is click on this full text finder link on the left. And so now here it's telling me it's in these various different databases. So I can find this in JSTOR, I can find this in Black Studies Center. Publisher site even may have. I usually go with the first, and JSTOR is usually a safe bet, especially since right now, all of JSTOR journals are accessible until December 31st, regardless what the library's collections have. We have 6 collections, not the entire JSTOR collection, but right now until December, regardless which JSTOR collection it is, we don't have to worry about it. There it is. There is our article. We can download our PDF. And assuming after we read through it or read through the abstract, this is what we want, definitely there is our second article we can use for our resource, for our paper. And so that's definitely important. Another place you can go is to OneSearch. This is basically the library's catalog, which right now only searches our online collection. We have most of our print turned off since we, as of October 2020, are not able to circulate physical items as of yet. We keep hoping as the COVID crisis continues to change and modify and hopefully eventually improve that we will at least be able to circulate items if not be physically open as of yet. But until then, you can definitely check to see if it's in this breath, if it didn't show up there in the other. And lo and behold, it shows up here. Actually, I don't know if that is the article itself. we may have found something that we may have already done the next step, something that cites an article, I suspect. And that's how, looks like we may have found a different article. But that's definitely something that we can further explore. If you go to Google Scholar, I first of all recommend that you have the Lean Library web app, the web extension in there already, because that's definitely going to help you with links right away. We go ahead and enter that. And notice here on the right, it says Google Scholar Enhanced. And you can go to here. And what I suspect will eventually happen is, yeah, there it is on the top right. There's our Lean Library extension. And so, you know, if we're on the publisher's website, it might tell us to do something ridiculous like pay $60 to view that article. You don't need to do that. Keep clicking on the pop-up and still it says get access. And here we are as before, we can then view this article. So that's the idea of footnote chasing. Now, let me give you another element of what we mean by footnote chasing. Let's say that we want to find an article that cites this one. Well, we can copy the title of this article and then, as before, start checking in our larger breadths, whether it's Google Scholar, Articles Plus, or OneSearch. Enter this itself. Now, you're going to be saying to yourself, well, hey, wait a second. Isn't that all it's going to do is lead me back to the article? Yes, and that's going to appear towards the top, but notice down below. You may find promising articles that have cited this article. So Black Power on the Telly, America, Television and Race in 1960s and 70s Britain. This might meet your curiosity, especially thinking of the Black Power movement, the counterculture movement in London in the 1970s, especially with Fredonia. And you might be interested in seeing how it was maybe conveyed on television in Britain at that time. So here we have our subject headings: Black Power, Television Broadcasting, Great Britain, Racism on Television, Black People on Television, and definitely, I mean, this could be a very promising article. And so you read through the abstract, determine if it's relevant. Notice, by the way, here's our database listed here as to where it's from. And then if it does meet to our liking, we'll want to email that article to yourself. Now, definitely you can save your articles, you save your PDFs, save them onto your clouds. But I recommend also sending them to emails because you never know if you might lose another access to another material. So come to here, we decide we want this article, we email it to ourselves as before, and post-colonialism, I think this is number 4, and click send. Now, one thing I want to warn you ahead of time, I may have found 4 articles, and I know that if I remember correctly, I think that is, maybe it's 5. I know that 2 are required to be from the library. I would recommend and encourage you, especially for an assignment like this, to try to focus more on what's in our library, because we have a huge, we have, you know, hundreds of thousands of articles available at your disposal here. And a lot, and if you went to Google at large and less, I mean, you have to always hope that Lean Library will work for you. There may be times where it doesn't show up and it is in the library's collection. So definitely come into here to find these. But if you, just because the first 4 look promising, you may end up not writing about those first 4. You may be going elsewhere, because that really is how research should work. Sometimes your research is going to lead you to other research. You're going to select, especially for what you write about, what is most appropriate about the themes that you write about for your research paper. Now, if you're going to Google at large, this by itself is fine, but if you need to limit your search for whatever reason, important parts to remember is oh God, they always change. Oh yeah, okay, settings, that's what I'm looking for. Go to settings and select advanced search. And I would select PDF. You might want to select EDU as well, but a lot of our scholarly publishers are actually have .com after them, even though they're scholarly publishers. So PDF should be fine enough. And yeah, of course, the first one showed up as JSTOR. And if it takes us to a different JSTOR page, there's our Lean Library link again that will take us directly to the article itself. And if we haven't logged in yet, we'll have our login screen. We log in that. That's how you get to here. So I've been babbling way too long. So, and I probably shown you more than you probably want for this assignment. But again, question of how to find, first of all, this research guide. From the library homepage, click on the Library Orientations tab. Scroll down until you get alphabetically to English4, followed by last name Langdon. And then use the search terms as your cheat sheet to help you figure out what terms to use. That will help you be more fruitful. Criticism backgrounds and library databases, I especially recommend you go while you're still exploring, figuring out what you're going to write about. And then if you especially have a theoretical framework or paradigm, then you can take advantage of the which database area. And then if you're especially having trouble or want or found a better article than the rest and want to know, ooh, maybe what they're referring to may also be as good, that's where you would want to use footnote chasing techniques. As I said, this page is fluid. I'm probably going to be introducing more things on this page. I especially plan to add Sophia Noble's talk on here, on the lower right here. And I also plan to include a link on this page, and maybe I'll do it on another page, what to do if your WID number does not work. There are other methods to get into databases, and the password to get into that handout, when I provide it, will be the last name of our author, Evaristo, so capital EVARISTO. And that will get you into that necessary handout that will tell you how to get into EBSCO databases, such as Articles Plus or Humanities International Complete, for example. How to get into ProQuest databases like Black Studies Center, or how to get into, or GenderWatch, that's also ProQuest database, or how to get into Gale databases like all those subject encyclopedias. That will be available on there. If your WID number doesn't work, you should definitely contact the Chat with the Librarian to let them know that you're having problems so we can follow up on that, because JSTOR, there's only one way to get in. But for most of the others, there are other ways to get in, and that will provide you a different URL and a different type of username and password to access those that I'm not allowed to state in a public website, which is thus why it will ask for a password and you just enter the last name of this author here. If you have any questions, my email address is nbuchwald@chabotcollege.edu. Otherwise, go into chat reference and a guest librarian will help you. And any other questions, feel free to ask me. If it's about the assignment itself, definitely ask Instructor Langdon. And I definitely wish you best fortunes in your research. And hopefully one day, say a year from now, maybe, I'll be able to meet you directly from the reference desk in the physical library itself. Even though I suspect in most cases, the questions that you have will be doing the type of things that I've been showing you today, which of course you can do right from your own home or anywhere off campus. So have a great day, and that's it.